You ever feel like something is holding you back? Something you can't quite put your finger on, but you know it's there? Well, today, we're going to dive into a powerful, invisible force that can shape our entire lives: emotional trauma. We're going to look at it through a specific faith-based lens that promises not just coping with it, but complete healing. And to really get a sense of just how big of a deal this is, get this. A huge international study published in the Economic Times actually followed more than 800,000 people for 75 years. And the conclusion? It was crystal clear. Unresolved emotional pain from any point in your life can really grow into serious problems later on. And that really brings us to a powerful truth that's at the heart of this whole perspective. Just like it says here, when there is a wounds inside, life on the outside cannot remain healthy. That one sentence kind of explains everything, doesn't it? It shows why the effects of trauma can feel like they touch every single part of your life. So what makes this stuff so tricky to deal with? Well, think about it. If you break your arm, everyone can see the cast. It's obvious. But emotional wounds, they're hidden. They can go totally unrecognized for years, not just by the people around us, but sometimes even by ourselves. And that's exactly what our source material calls it, an invisible wound. But its effects, they're not isolated. They ripple out, touching our personal well-being, our relationships with family, and even our spiritual life. It's like this extra weight we're carrying that makes every other challenge we face just that much harder. Okay, so if these wounds are invisible, how in the world do we know they're even there? A lot of the time, the first clues are the questions we start asking ourselves. You know, the ones that hint at some kind of deep disruption going on inside. Let's dig into some of those signs. This is a big one. On the surface, everything might look totally fine. You've got the job, the family, the daily routine. But underneath all of that, there's just this constant feeling that something's off. A nagging sense that real joy is just missing. Or how about this one? It points to being emotionally reactive. You know, when tiny little things set off these huge reactions, a simple comment can feel like a major personal attack, and you find yourself boiling over with frustration at the drop of a hat. That's often a sign of a deeper pain that's being poked. And finally, there's this question, which really shows the impact on our relationships. When past hurts make it almost impossible to let people in, it can lead to suspicion and feeling isolated, even when all you really want is to connect with someone. You know, these questions, they don't just stay inside our heads. They start to show up on the outside as real symptoms. Things like getting angry over really small stuff, feeling irritated and frustrated all the time, and that deep-seated problem with trusting people. It can make you pull away from relationships and just live with this quiet hum of dissatisfaction. There's just no peace. So what's at the root of all this lingering pain? Well, the perspective here frames the diagnosis through a biblical lens. It points to the book of Isaiah to make a really crucial point. Having wounds isn't the problem. Life is tough. Everyone gets wounded. The real issue is that those wounds are left untreated. They haven't been cleansed, bandaged, or healed. And to really bring this idea to life, the source doesn't just give us theory, it gives us stories. It looks at these major figures from the Bible who went through some truly immense trauma, but according to the text, found a way forward. I mean, just look at these examples. The trauma is staggering. You have Joseph, betrayed by his own brothers and thrown in prison. David, rejected by his family and hunted for his life. Daniel, facing a horrific death just for doing the right thing. The pain is undeniable. But in every story, the outcome points to a pivotal choice they made. They actively decided not to let bitterness win, and instead, they turned towards their faith. And this all boils down to one crucial takeaway, which this slide shows perfectly. Holding onto our wounds just pulls our lives down, down, down into bitterness and despair. But the alternative, placing those same wounds in God's hands, is presented as the very thing that allows us to be lifted up. Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem, we've looked at some historical examples, but what about right now, for us? How does a person actually go from being wounded to being healed? The source lays out a really clear path to get there. According to this viewpoint, the whole path to healing kicks off with a promise, stated right here. I will restore health to you and heal you of your wounds. This frames healing not as something you just hope for, but as a deliberate, intentional act of restoration. Now, this leads to a really critical step in the process: forgiveness. This approach argues that holding on to unforgiveness just makes the wounds deeper instead of letting them heal. And let's be super clear, this is not about saying what happened was okay. Not at all. It's about releasing the burden of that pain so it stops having power over you. It's an act of setting yourself free. So this slide breaks it all down into 3 practical steps. First step is honesty. You have to actually acknowledge the wound. Stop hiding it. That leads to step 2, surrender. You make a conscious choice to place that wound into God's hands and decide you're not going to carry it by yourself anymore. And that all leads to the final step, forgiveness, the act of finally releasing that heavy burden for good. But this whole journey of healing, it's not just about us feeling better for our own sakes. The source material suggests there's actually a much greater purpose waiting at the end of this road. And here it is, the ultimate transformation. The goal isn't just to patch you up. The idea is that your healed wound becomes your story, a testimony that you can then use to bring comfort and hope to other people who are going through the same thing. Your pain actually finds a new purpose. And so we're left with this final, powerful question. Is the wound going to be the thing that defines you, the identity you carry through life, or will it become the story of your healing, a testimony that can be a light for others? According to this perspective, that choice is yours.